David Spencer is the head of crime and justice at the Policy Exchange, a former Met Police inspector or even officer. How are you, David?
Good evening. Good to see you, Jeremy.
Oh, God, I'm having a busy... Honestly, the world's gone particularly mad. Let's talk from a police point of view. We were talking to Peter Blexley an hour ago. Shocking news today. The policy, every demographic group in this survey, every democratic group in this country wants the police to concentrate on solving crime, David. What an absolute shock that is, isn't it?
Well, I know it sounds pretty obvious. We polled 2,000 people as part of a major study that we at Policy Exchange have been doing, and we found that every single demographic group, every economic group, every supporters of every political party all say that they want the police to take a tougher approach to crime. So this isn't just sort of one group. It's not just older people. It's not just men.
Everybody.
Older people, younger people, literally every group say the police need to take a tougher approach on crime. And what we're particularly seeing as well is that the way it breaks down by political party is really interesting over the last 5 years. And so, for example, what we saw is that tough on crime voters abandoned the Conservative Party in favour of both Reform and Labour over the last election. And also what we're seeing is that the Labour government, there is a real risk for them because there was 89 constituencies at the last election where Reform came second to Labour. And the Labour government has a real risk here that if they don't take a tough on crime approach, those 89 constituencies in particular, they're going to find themselves vulnerable to the Reform.
I mean, listen, great work. The reason I introduced it as it was, and I'm delighted you've done the work, David, I think it's very important. But please, God, that tells me this world has not gone completely mad. The whole idea, as I said to somebody earlier, when I was growing up, was that there was a fear of the police. And criminals were concerned because we had policemen and women, shock horror, on the street sharing intel and arresting people because they could see what's going on. We now live in a world where if you make hurty word comments, you can go to prison for 15 months. And I think you're really interesting to make that point because I think most people are fed up. Whether you run a shop, the police won't come if you have under 200 quid's worth of goods nicked. An old lady gets mugged or somebody has their watch. We don't see the police. They're not visible anymore, and yet they suddenly are if something ideological, these hate crimes. I mean, I don't know. What was the survey like on that? What were people saying about, prioritising online hate? They must have been as strong about that as about dealing with real crime on the streets, weren't they?
It was very, very clear that when we ask people, what do you want the police to do? They focus on violent crime, sexual assaults, these sorts of things. They want to spend far less time, or they think that it's far less important dealing with online, as we call it, sort of hate crime or non-crime hate incidents. They absolutely want that. And what I would say is, you said I'm a former police officer, and that's right, I was a police officer for a long time. And what I know is when I speak to police officers, they want to be dealing with violent crime. They want to be dealing with
then with respect, why aren't they in your mind as an ex-police officer? Why aren't they? Is it government? Is it ideology? Is it police bosses? What is causing the very people who are supposed to legislate for us and deal with these criminals from not doing what we feel they need to be doing?
Well, I think if we look at the last 10 years of government, we saw less police officers on the streets between sort of 2010, 2018. That's had a big effect on policing. We've seen a massive rollback in stop and search. So from about the last 10 years, we've seen stop and search rolled back significantly. And what's really interesting when you look at the data is as the number of stop and searches reduces, the amount of knife crime goes up. That's very, very clear.
And just stopping you there a sec, because I've done loads on this. That is because the bedwetters, as I call them, will say, oh, stop and search is a racist tool used by the police and you're stopping young black men. And there is proof, certainly in London, that 83% of the crime is committed against and by black men. So at the end of the day, why are we as a society getting to a point where we're pandering to that view rather than carrying out techniques that we know will make our streets safer?
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because when we looked at the study that we've just done that I was talking about, we asked people the same sort of questions about how tough do you want the police to be, how satisfied are you with the police? And again, whether you're white, black, Asian, whatever your ethnicity, You tell us time and again you want the police to be tougher on crime.
Yeah.
So this isn't something where it's just white people want people to be tough on crime. It's across the board.
Yeah.
That's what we want. And what I would say to the government, particularly this government, is that you absolutely need to focus on being tougher on crime, because if you spend your time listening with respect to the ultra progressive activists, either within your party or elsewhere, then you are going to be missing the point of what the vast majority of voters are looking for.
Really interesting. Also, there was a story today. I'd love your take on this, David, if you're OK. West Yorkshire Police has disclosed the true cost of its spending on diversity, equality and inclusion. They spent £1 million on diversity and ambassadorial roles, emphasising its commitment to building a workforce that reflects the diverse communities it serves. Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States, love him or loathe him, stood up the other day and said, and I quote, I'm going to be colourblind and merit-based. Surely, this DEI stuff is also holding back the police in terms of dealing with crime on a daily basis.
Well, I'm genuinely astounded. I hadn't seen this story, but £1 million sounds like a lot of money to me. And it sounds like quite a number of police officers that could be out there on the streets.
There's a department. Peter Blexley was telling me there's an inspector and about 6 or 8 staff. It's £1 million to do something, to make sure, basically, that we're building a workforce that reflects the diverse communities it serves in West Yorkshire. What about putting those 8 policemen and women and £1 million worth of resources on the street to catch the burglars and the drug dealers and the rapists and the murderers? That doesn't make sense to me.
Certainly, well, I'm not sure I can help you make sense of it, Jeremy. Certainly, if I was the Police and Crime Commissioner for West Yorkshire, I'd be asking some questions as to whether those people are really deployed in the right place, or whether there are other places that those people should be. And they're the sort of questions we would expect elected government and police and crime commissioners to be asking. So, I have to big up the Policy Exchange, because it's things like this that might seem blatantly obvious to people, but when you hear your facts that the majority of the UK, age, demographic, race, culture, creed, religion, whatever we're supposed to say, because the world will be wrong, right? Whatever pronoun you want to use. Most people in this country are fed up with crime and want the police to be stronger. That's the message, David, to sum up, isn't it? I think that's right. And certainly what we're seeing in the work that we do is that people are pretty fed up of what they consider to be a permissive environment for crime, and that one of the things they want to see time and again, and is becoming more and more important, particularly when we've seen last week, the new results came out, a 12% increase in crime compared to this time last year, that people just they've had enough. They want a less permissive environment for crime. Really appreciate you being on. Thank you, David Spencer, Head of Crime and Justice at the Policy Exchange. 20 minutes to 6 o'clock.